What if I told you there's a country spending $2 billion every single year on milk? Not oil, not gold, not diamonds, milk. And here's the crazy part, they could be producing most of it themselves, but they're not. This is Nigeria, Africa's economic powerhouse, home to 220 million people. The country produces 700,000 tons of milk every year, but consumes 1.7 million tons. So what happens? They import 70% of their dairy from other countries. That's $2 billion flowing out of Nigeria every single year. And it gets more interesting. Nigeria's domestic dairy market is valued at $5.9 billion, growing at over 10% every year. Now, imagine standing next to a gold mine worth nearly $6 billion and barely be able to grab a handful of gold while others are filling trucks. That's exactly what's happening to Nigerian dairy farmers right now. And this gold mine is about to get much bigger. Nigeria's population is exploding, from 220 million people today to 400 million by 2050. And as Nigerians move to cities and join the middle class, they're developing a taste for more dairy products. Per person milk consumption is set to nearly double, from 8.6 liters today to 16 liters by 2050. Let me put that in perspective. That's a 158% increase in dairy demand over just 25 years. The opportunity exists, and it is massive and growing. Now the question is, who's going to capture it? In this episode, we dive in detail into Nigeria's dairy paradox. The math is simple. More people plus higher incomes equals a massive dairy boom. While demand rockets upward, local supply crawls along at a snail pace. This creates a structural imbalance, but what's really happening is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity being handed to foreign suppliers on a silver platter. On one side, you have Nigeria's traditional milk producers. About 95% are Fulani pastoralists who've been herding cattle for generations. Their indigenous breeds, like white Fulani, yield maybe 1 to 4 liters per cow per day on a good day. Now compare that to a Holstein cattle pumping out 30 liters daily, and you start to see the problem. These pastoralists aren't running modern dairy operations. They are using traditional methods, hand milking, dealing with poor animal nutrition, limited veterinary care, and constant security threats. Most of their milk is consumed at home or sold informally. Think roadside vendors, not supermarket shelves. On the other side, you have multinational giants like Friesland Campina, Nestle, and Arla. These companies control the formal dairy market, and they source over 97% of their raw materials from imported milk powder. The government sees this massive trade deficit and thinks, we need to fix this. So, ambitious policies are created, the National Dairy Policy and the National Livestock Transformation Plan. Officials are promising to double milk production by 2030, achieve self-sufficiency, and even start exporting dairy products across Africa. It always sounds great on paper, but implementation is where dreams meet reality. So what exactly is keeping Nigeria locked in this import trap? Let's follow the money because the economics are brutal. Local milk costs 2 to 3 times more than imported powder. Why? Start with productivity. While global averages hover around 6.6 liters per cow per day, Nigerian cattle are stuck at the bottom of the performance ladder. Then there's the feed problem. These cattle aren't getting carefully balanced rations delivered on schedule. They're trekking across the landscape looking for grass and water, dealing with seasonal shortages, heat stress, and drought. Poor nutrition means even less milk from already low-producing animals. But the real killer is what happens after the milk leaves the cow. Nigeria's midstream infrastructure is, to put it charitably, a disaster. Let's say you're a small-scale farmer who's just milked its cows, and you need to get that highly perishable product to market. But 80% of Nigeria's roads are in terrible condition. You need refrigeration, but reliable electricity is a luxury. You need at the very least organized collection, but the cold chain infrastructure covers only about 4% of dairy needs. Without bulk milk chillers, refrigerated trucks, and reliable power, fresh milk spoils before it can reach processors. So in that case, what do smart business people do? They skip the headache entirely and buy imported powder instead. It's shelf-stable, predictable, and doesn't require an expensive cold chain that barely exists. This creates a vicious cycle. Processors choose powder because local milk is expensive and unreliable. Local farmers can't invest in better systems because there's no guaranteed market for their fresh milk. The infrastructure doesn't get built because there's not enough volume to justify the investment. All the while, $2 billion keeps flowing overseas every year. Policymakers have tried various approaches, but they often end up creating new problems while solving old ones. For example, tariff reductions made imports cheaper but undercut local farmers. Foreign exchange restrictions were supposed to force backward integration but ended up benefiting some companies while penalizing others. Implementation delays and funding constraints mean that grand plans often don't translate into real change at the farm level. The human cost is substantial. Pastoralists who own most of Nigeria's cattle are seeing their traditional way of life under pressure. Limited access to finance keep them trapped in subsistence-level operations. Meanwhile, consumers face volatile prices shaped by currency fluctuations and import dependence. But some companies decided to stop complaining about the system and start changing it instead. Friesland Campina Wamco made the boldest move early on. They invested millions in local dairy development, not just buying existing operations, but actually building a supply chain from scratch. They organized 23 farmer cooperatives, opened collection centers, and integrated over 10,000 smallholder pastoralists into a formal fresh milk network. Friesland Campina proved that local sourcing could work at commercial scale. Ala Foods took a different approach, but with the same goal. In 2023, they opened a state-of-the-art demonstration farm that doubles as a training hub. Think of it as a working laboratory, where traditional pastoralists can see modern dairy operations in action. Ala also committed to buying milk from the Damau Household Milk Farm project, an ambitious plan to settle 1,000 nomadic households on 8,200 hectares and transition them to commercial dairy farming. More than 25,000 people have gone through their training programs. These aren't feel-good corporate social responsibility initiatives. They're serious attempts to build a dependable supply chain that can compete with imports. Both models attack the same fundamental problem. How do you formalize milk supply at the farm gate and create reliable routes from herds to processors? The answer involves three key elements that work together like gears in a machine. First, you need smart financing. Traditional banks see smallholder pastoralists as high-risk borrowers, so specialized programs like the Central Bank's Livestock Development Initiative provide targeted capital with lower interest rates. Asset-based credit structures use dairy cows or cooling equipment as collateral. Pay-per-use models spread the cost of expensive cold chain equipment over time, matching payments to actual cash flow from milk sales. Second, you upgrade the genetics. This is where the science gets exciting. Recent programs have used artificial insemination to introduce Holstein, Friesian, and Jersey genetics into local herds. A breakthrough embryo transfer program brought heat-tolerant genetics into Nigerian cows. Third, and perhaps most crucial, you build the cold chain infrastructure. The midstream has been the weakest link in Nigeria's dairy sector, but that's changing. Solar-powered cold rooms are spreading rapidly, helping bridge power grid gaps. Collection centers with bulk milk chillers prevent spoilage at the farm gate. Refrigerated trucks create dependable routes from rural areas to processing plants. The cold chain opportunity is enormous. 6 billion enormous. And yes, the numbers are the same. The dairy market and the cold chain market are both valued individually at around $6 billion. And within the cold chain, dairy represents about $200 million of it. Every massive opportunity needs a catalyst. For Nigeria's dairy revolution, that catalyst came from an unexpected place: currency policy. In 2019, the central bank linked foreign exchange access to backward integration requirements. Companies that wanted cheap dollars for imports had to demonstrate local investment and sourcing. In 2020, authorities restricted official foreign exchange access for dairy imports to a select list of companies that were investing locally. The results were mixed. Imports continued rising, and some arbitrage opportunities emerged. But the signal was clear: tie your imports to local production or find another way to fund them. When foreign exchange restrictions were lifted in 2023 and 2024, the government essentially stepped out of the currency business. No more controlled access to cheap US dollars for importers. Instead, companies had to compete in the open market for foreign currency just like everyone else. This meant dairy importers were now at the mercy of daily currency fluctuations. When the naira weakened against the dollar, which it did frequently, importing became instantly more expensive. When it strengthened, costs dropped. The economics of bringing in foreign dairy products became a direct reflection of how Nigeria's currency was performing that day. Market forces and naira movements became the main factors determining import economics. Meanwhile, development programs targeted the specific bottlenecks that kept local production uncompetitive. The National Dairy Policy created a unified framework for improving farm practices, attracting processing investment, and building regulatory systems to support domestic supply growth. This shift is creating clear winners and losers in Nigeria's dairy sector. Multinational companies with existing capital, processing plants, and established brands are best positioned to benefit. Friesland Campina, Arla, Nestlé, Promasidor, and others can turn policy incentives into large-scale local sourcing operations. Their backward integration programs, demonstration farms, and guaranteed purchase agreements lock in both volume and quality from farmer partners. But traditional nomadic herders face a more uncertain future. They still supply the majority of domestic milk, but most of their production never enters formal markets. As the sector formalizes, herders who can't connect to organized collection systems and cold storage routes risk being left behind. Entrepreneurial processors and logistics companies are finding new opportunities in the gaps. Processors are targeting premium market segments with fresh local milk, often blending with powder to manage costs. Cold chain specialists and refrigerated transport companies are seeing growth as dairy logistics become more professional. Technology companies are developing collection routing systems and financial services tailored to dairy farmers. But can Nigeria build these systems fast enough to capture its own market before demand growth makes the import dependency even worse? The pieces are on the table. Policy frameworks, financing programs, proven case studies, genetic improvements, and expanding cold chains. The turning point isn't waiting for some dramatic announcement. Kenya and Uganda are watching this $6 billion market with intense interest. Both countries have been aggressively modernizing their dairy industries, and they're perfectly positioned to fill any supply gaps that Nigeria can't cover.